happened. However, one thing that we could do, because we want to make sure that we have good future business, is we will redock with the spacecraft and help bring it back into the right place before it hits any satellites from Karuna.
Wonderful. An offer to redock and reposition the satellite, a second RPO. Very interesting. All right, let's do the table in the middle here.
Yeah, I think I agree. And as a company, we can start investigating and see if this incident was caused by the docking itself or caused by manufacturing errors or other sort of errors. So it could be not our fault, but we are we want to investigate on this.
Investigating while trying not to be seen as liable. Very good strategy.
Very responsible. Did you want to add some perspective?
Yeah, so we came to the same conclusion as the two tables. We figured the first thing we've got to do is give our due diligence and ensure while in this operational situation to determine, do whatever we can with the functional satellite if need be, but also lawyer up and determine if we're at fault. And work with our country of origin as well to determine what position best to take.
Speaking of your country of origin, now let's go to Andova.
So Andova is a very multicultural country, as expressed by the diversity at this table, which led us to fascinating discussions because it was very clear in our discussions that our national perspectives and cultures were informing our perspectives on the position of Andova. So diversity of thought is necessary in every single space policy and law room. So we all were quite clear under international space law, Andova has no responsibility at all. End of story. Unless perhaps maybe we should have entered into consultation if we thought perhaps there might have been some impact on other active space activities, but that's a pretty soft one. Otherwise, we thought as long as we've authorized and supervised, what we lack is enough information about our own domestic space laws to know what we mean by continual supervision. And we also lack enough information about causality, because if there's no fault, we're in the clear, but if there is fault, then perhaps that would be more difficult for us. So we need to know more factual information. But what the crux of our discussion really was, how do you ensure, because we don't have a sufficient framework for this novel space activity of refueling, so how do you ensure at the domestic level that we are going to have a framework that's going to cultivate and support the commercial development of this capability? At the same time, it's a mission disposal capability. It helps debris mitigation. How can we help that happen without it being simply we're not at fault if something goes wrong? Because we still need long-term sustainability, continued access for more countries. We can't just be a dominant power that says we don't care once it's up there in space. So we didn't have a solution to that problem, but we did we did raise it.
Sounds like a wonderful discussion. Thank you to the beautifully diverse Council of Andova. And one thing I want to highlight before we go to the next table was the idea of international liability. We discussed earlier how the launching state is absolutely liable for anything they launch if it causes harm on Earth, on the ground, in the air. But it's a little different when it comes to incidents in space, that if a satellite collides with another satellite, the liability is based upon fault. But fault in the treaties is not clearly defined in a space concept. So not only is this not technically defined exactly what happened and who's at fault, 'tis also not legally defined. And that is where the further discussion and the development of norms to help interpret the law might be helpful. But we gave you very little information to go off of, so I'm glad you had such a rich discussion. All right, now to the poor suffering country of Brunia. What's happening with your satellite?
I just want to mention that I just entered the room and sat at the table when you made the team, so I was trapped. Okay, but it was a pleasure. I think we had a great team. So in our understanding, so we are we have the satellite registered in our national register. So somehow, and we are a country that has subscribed to the national treaty, all of them. So basically, even if not binding, we want to play the role of the good guys. And so the first thing I think for us would be, as soon as we are made aware that there is this drifting problem, is the first thing would be to warn the other country to say, guys, we are having this problem. Look, we tell you. So it's start looking at it. We will look at it on our side, and we will try to find a solution. So that would be the first thing that we feel compelled to do. The second thing would be more on a technical side, to say, okay, we have to try, at least try hard as possible, to find a solution to it, to demonstrate that we have done our best and it's not our fault. So we were thinking about different solutions, like deploying different teams, technical team, one to try to recover the communication with the satellite, so to put the satellite under control. The other one to evaluate with the company the possibility to redock and then either move the satellite to the graveyard or whatever. And then, of course, in parallel, we are going a little bit technical. The third thing would have been, okay, let's ask the tracking of the satellite to understand exactly where it is going, at which speed, when the collision might be, so that we can share this information with the other, and they are in the position to basically to move the satellite. And third thing, say, once that we have done all of this, I think that we are in the position to say we did our best. So, and we cannot do anything more than that. So the next point was call the lawyer, because then there will be a legal case to understand who is liable in the end for this.
And it's great that even though you were mentioning a number of technical responses, there is a ton of law, policy, and norms that would shape how those responses play out, especially because you're communicating with a company that's nationally registered with another country.
I think that would open a Pandora box, basically, because it's a case that I don't think it's regulated at all.
Especially with it being a government satellite, how much information are you willing to share on the satellite itself and on the anomaly in particular? How are you going to coordinate not just with the company, but with their country? Because ultimately, if one or both of the countries is seen as being liable, that's kind of between you two, and that's another challenge. But now let's try to get us quickly to our final country in the back corner. How are you feeling? This could be scary. What's going on?
Okay, so on our side, the first step is to go to the operational response. So we suppose that we have a service provider for anti-collision, and we start a traffic coordination with the spacecraft which is drifting. And so the first, before going into the liability, the first emergency is to ensure the safety and the sustainability of the area. So exchange ephemeris, data, and if we are in the future, we can suppose that this spacecraft can be in the frame of a national law or perhaps technical regulation. And we know that there is some countries who are developing this kind of regulation. And for example, in this particular case, if you are not able to share your data or your ephemeris, you can be considered to be in a fault somewhere, or at least from a country perspective. So our answer is first to be in the operational answer, and second to see what is the liability.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was really wonderful discussions and ideas proposed by all of the groups. We didn't give you a ton to go off of, so I was really impressed with how much we were able to dive into some of these really thorny issues. One of the features of the scenario is that we looked at a pretty novel activity when it comes to space operations, something that's pretty far forward when it comes to norms. But it is important to note that from a technological standpoint, a lot of this is already well underway. And so we have a challenge when it comes to the international framework for space behavior between balancing technical advancement with policy, governance, and normative advancement. So one thing to really take away as we leave this session now, we're in our final minutes. I'll try to leave 1 or 2 minutes for final questions. But as we think about what the framework is today, we tried to give an overview, but there's so many other pieces that we could have looked at. What are the gaps that you think need to be filled? As a space actor, whatever organization you're a part of, what are the things you would like to see from norms, policy, and law? What are the steps that could be taken, both in collaboration with others and as your own organization, to help support the development of this governance framework? And what are the questions that you have that need to be answered? Where is the common ground that we can find between space actors to help either find low-hanging fruit or try to address the hardest problems together? Because that's all going to be part of this crazy framework, this house that we're building together. So thank you all. Do we have any questions before we wrap up entirely? Yes. Yes, you.
Where's the question? You have the question?
Just out of curiosity, the the Astrofuel company signed a contract with Brunia, but didn't sign a contract with the what's that? Their own government. So what can you say about that action?
Well, the contract is specific to this operation, the provision of a service. Relationships between companies and their governments aren't necessarily contractual in this case because Astrofuel is not providing the service to the government of Andova, they're providing it to Brunia. So instead you would look at what are the national regulations, what's the licensing, that's how you have that kind of legal and policy relationship on this specific fictional scenario. So that's how that works out. It's not necessarily contractual that the relationship.
But the contract is about liability, right? What happens during the event when the refueling happens. So I wondered, so the company accepted liability during the refueling, but by liability convention, it's still the government of that company that's absolutely liable. Is that correct?
I'm not totally, Audrey, did you hear a little better than me?
I think he means because there's a country that's behind the commercial operator. Does the country still have some sort of responsibility over their commercial company?
Yeah, and the short answer is yes, because Andova has the responsibility to authorize and supervise. So we don't know exactly what the policy and the law of Andova is, what's the mechanism they're using to authorize and supervise the operation. But if they want to be fulfilling their outer space treaty commitments, then there is some mechanism that they would want to have in place for that operation. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Just to follow up my colleague's intervention, since now we are not anymore the company, we finished, so we can speak about something we noticed, that the license was given for imaging and spectrum use, not for in-orbit servicing.
That's for launching and operating a spacecraft.
Yes, so which certainly is a gray area, I think, still today. So that perhaps is the point. I don't know, what do you think about?
All right, I think they're going to give me the hook and pull me off the stage.
Oh, okay.
So, hopefully we'll all be able to keep this conversation going throughout the rest of the IAC. Thank you all so much for being here and being such active participants, and we hope you learned a lot. We'll take away some good thoughts for the future about space and the international framework for behavior. Thank you all.